I was scrolling through LinkedIn the other day and I got called out. Carl had created this really awesome StreetFighter dashboard inside a Strato and actually challenged a couple of other BI people in the LinkedIn space to create it in their own respective tools. So I asked him for the dataset and I had to oblige by making this inside Power BI. This is basically a really simple thing to do using ImgURLs and SVGs in order to get this champion selection type of screen with the interactive buttons. This was actually originally made by Louis Philippe and it was really awesome because he actually has his own YouTube video which goes through how he made this in ClickSense. I will link them in the description, please check them out. So with that, I'm going to show you how to make this today and it'll be really quick. Let's get started. The dataset's going to be in my GitHub in the StreetFighter report repo. Basically, it's just an Excel file. And this basically contains just a little bit of data. It's got a couple of lines, one for each individual character, 3 different tabs where it has the characters, SVGs for different, it's like things that are going to be used inside the dashboard, as well as a tier list that you could absolutely use to make something really cool if you wanted to in terms of visuals. That's not the point of this. Today, I'm just showing you how we can use these visuals inside Power BI, as well as working with the button slicer in order to get this really cool effect. The data itself has the things that we're actually going to use is the character's name, as well as some of their bio information, what they hate, what they like, their height and their weight. And you'll see that if you scroll a little bit to the right, there's SVGs in terms of their name as an SVG, as well as images of the background of the black and white and the color and the actual image itself. And they're all going to be image URLs. So it's a URL. So if I click on this, what's going to happen is it's going to take me to a website that has this image. And we can utilize this inside Power BI. So first, we're going to open up a fresh Power BI report and just get that data in there. Once we do, we should have basically everything. I don't actually need the tier list because I'm not going to use it. So I'm just going to load the first 2 tabs. And I'm going to go into transform data because I can obviously see that one of the headers needs to be fixed. Here, SVGs, I need to go to transform, use first row as headers so that description and SVG code is at the actual headers. Let's go to character table and that seems to be completely okay. I'm going to close and apply. And once I do, we're just going to make this as fast as possible. So bear with me. First, we're going to open up the new card. Basically, this is going to be the background. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up the characters and I'm going to take the image background column. I'm going to click on the image background column. I'm going to select the type of this image, that is to say the data category. And if you select the data category, if you change it to image URL, you'll finally be able to use this inside the card. So I'm going to click on the card, open up the format pane, close this filter pane for now. Click on size and style. And of course, I have to actually add something. I'm just going to put the image not the image background. I'm going to put the character in there. So you can actually see that the first character's name is going to be there. And that's completely fine for now. We're going to make sure that we turn off the background. We're going to remove the callout values as well as the label. And we're going to go scroll down to images. In images, we're going to select image to be on. And in the image type, change it to image URL. And here, what we're going to do is we're going to basically select image URL based around the field character of the image background. So the first image background, that's completely fine. This is what's actually being selected. And now you can see that the image background works and is being shown. Now we have to do a couple things to make sure that it's right. We have to remove all of the different text as well as the padding. So let's do that. We're going to make sure that there's no space between image. I'm not sure if this is the right one. No, that's okay. We're going to close the image out. We're going to open up cards and we're going to make sure that there's no background, there's no border, and that the padding is custom. And once you select custom, just set the padding to be 0 on all sides. After we do that, we can get rid of this text. So let's go to the callout values, make sure that the label is in fact off. And now you can see this is almost as good as it's going to get. There is a little bit of padding here, and to get rid of everything, you might need to go into padding of the size and style and make sure that is also set to 0. And now there should be as little padding as possible. So it's a little bit more difficult to see, but this is in fact almost as big as it can possibly get. Then we're going to copy this, Control C, Control V. So now I've copied one of these images. so that you can see that this is basically what I want. Now there's just an image which is completely transparent, and it works great. The reason that I've done this is because we're going to go to the image column in the characters table, make sure that it's also categorized as an image URL. And now we're going to make this image reference not the image URL here, but reference the first image. And by doing so, we've got a nicely stylized image of the actual character. Awesome. Now let's get started on the actual buttons. Buttons are supposed to be a little bit responsive and have a nice little bit color of them. And when you hover over them, they actually have a little bit of padding attached so that you can see that it's the one that's being selected. It's really nice and actually very simple to do. All you need to do is first go and insert in from your visual gallery a new slicer. You can't actually see it because of my head, but the new slicer button is this, it's like the slicer button with this lightning bolt on it. And all we need to do is first we're going to add character to the field. And in the images, we're going to put for the default, we're going to set image color into the field. Now we're actually going to make the saturation be 0% in order to get that black whiteness, as well as set the space between images to be 0 for now. We're going to go back, go to the callout values, make sure that the values are turned off because we don't actually need that text. We're going to go to the layout and we're going to set this to be, let's see, that's 4 by 5. So let's set the layout. We're going to put it in style 4 rows and 5 columns. That's pretty great. Sorry, that was wrong. 5 rows, 4 columns. That's how it should. Then we're going to go and clean this up. This is already pretty, it's like much what we want, but we do need to change a bunch of things. So go to the size and style, turn off the background, go into title, just turn that off, go into slicer settings. We're going to put single select and force selection. What that's going to do is it's going to make sure that at least one of these are always selected, even when you turn on the, it's like report. The shape itself, sure, it can be a rectangle. That really doesn't matter so much. It's going to be like this pretty much. And for the layout grids, this is okay. Space between buttons, maybe let's put that to 0. And for overflow, we aren't going to have any overflow at all, but overflow basically decides whether or not you'll scroll through this or you'll have pagination with buttons. Callout values, that we make sure that those are turned off. Go to images. Now, right now, we have the default state, and make sure that you select the ignore padding to be turned on. That's pretty cool because if you go into hover and then you put ignore padding off, then you can get this really cool effect where it kind of expands when you actually hover over it. You put the saturation to 100%. So now when you hover over things, it actually changes color. Very nice. Then go to the selected item here. You can set ignore padding to be off and just turn the saturation on so that the selected item is always going to have color in it. That's really nice. And that's already pretty close to this setting here. Now we're going to keep going and we don't really need to change the images so much anymore, but the buttons is going to be the most important. Now the buttons also have different states, but what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the border is turned off and that the fill is turned off and that the padding is set to custom. You remember what we're going to do? Put all of the padding to be 0. And now you can see that this is a lot closer to, it's like what we're expecting. Now we can do this for everything. And it's like, that's just basically what it's done automatically. If we wanted to actually get this look where it increases a little bit, we do need to, in fact, put a little bit of padding. So we can actually go to, it's like the default and make sure that the custom padding is just narrow. And if we just have narrow instead of completely, it's like off, you'll get this slightly interactive way of looking at these buttons. That's basically all that you need to do. You can actually do a couple of other things. For example, in the selected item, you could do something like a glow. But the problem with using a glow is that it can, it's like change the size if you have it on the outside. And if you have it on the inside, it'll change, it's like what the actual image looks like. So it's not really my favorite way to go about it. Nevertheless, there are a lot of different options that you can use. Now let's get started on the slightly more annoying part, which is getting the actual names and, it's like all of the other parts of the data into the dashboard. It's a bit annoying because the data is actually being stored as SVGs. Now, SVGs, you may or may not know, is actually part of HTML code as far as I am aware. And it does not work if you put this SVG name as an image URL and try to do the same thing here. In fact, you actually have to do something slightly different. There's two ways about this, which is that you can actually convert the SVGs into something called base64 in order to use them exactly the same way that I've done now. But I'm not going to do that, and instead I'm going to go into Insert, Visual Gallery. I'm going to get more visuals. I'm going to click on Get More Visuals so that I can get the HTML content visual. So I'm going to install this, and this is what I'm going to do to visualize that SVG. So now that I've added that visual to my reports, I'm going to make sure that I can actually open it up. And this visual itself basically just has a couple of things. It can add values, granularity, and tooltips. But if I just take the SVG, put it into values, you can actually see that here it is. Zangief is the name of the character, but you can actually see that it's not allowing me to show everything. This is because the SVG name in itself has a specific view box and is actually blocking me from being able to change, it's like the size so much. And in order to overcome this, we can actually use a little bit of code in order to change this a little bit. I've actually written this out already, but I will, add this in the description or something. Basically, I'm going to create a new measure. I'm going to just paste the measure in here. And what this has done is I'm giving this, it's like SVG name, it's like a little bit of a layer. So it's going to have the SVG wrapped inside a little bit of text of styling. So basically all that it's doing is I'm going to make sure that all of the letters are white and that this, it's like value itself is always going to have a height of 150 pixels. It's going to change the view box to a slightly larger size using the substitute function. And that's basically it. And this works because the SVG name is technically a text value, which I can, it's like change and mess around with using the substitute function. What this looks like when I actually do this is, let me just open this up. SVG name is honestly just a big text that has, it's like now a little bit of CSS wrapping it. And instead of you putting the SVG name there, if I can put SVG name inside this here, then you'll see that, okay, so now you can't see anything, but that's also because I need to make sure that the background is off. And now we have this lovely white text. Just make sure that the text box size is fine. And then if I select something else, then the text size is okay. Maybe I need to move things around a little bit. Maybe I'll move this image here a bit more, make that slightly bigger. Great, that looks fine. It's okay if it's a little bit covering, and we can move this even a little bit more to the side. Cool, so that's what it looks like. Ryu, Ken, Juri, really cool stuff. Now we actually have to do the same thing for the character, which is going to be different parts of the SVG here. Now, the second table SVG that we haven't really looked at yet basically has SVG code for different parts of different text, basically. And we're only going to use one. We're only going to use the characters, and we're going to do it in basically the exact same way that we're using for SVG name. So let me just copy this this measure. We'll make it here. Let's call it SVG character, and you can see that it's just using the selected value of the SVG code, and it's just making it white. And by doing that, I can use this I'm just going to copy and paste this HTML visual, and I'm going to make sure that the SVG character is replaced in the values here. Now, even though I've actually made sure that this HTML visual is using the SVG character, you can't see anything. And that's because you actually need to filter so that if the SVG character is something, then I'm going to go to the description, add that to the filter. I'm going to select on characters. And now that you can see this white text characters shows up, that's exactly what I want. And you can see that's aligned with how I would like it to be displayed. And finally, we're going to add the bio as well as the different characteristics of the different characters. In order to do that, the easiest way is to actually use the new cards again. And I'm going to just place that new card right here. we will go into the bio and just put that into the data right here. When you actually put this, sometimes you'll see that it's a little bit difficult to see. Just make sure that, you do need to make everything different. So I'm going to go and turn the background off in size and style. I'm going to go one by one into the layout. That's fine. Callout values will turn off the, it's like actual. The values is what we need, and the label is what we're going to turn off. The values here, let's set it to size 12, and we're going to make sure that the text wrap is on. We're going to make the color white because we're going to make this aligned, and turn the background off. Let's see, cards, we can turn the background off, turn the border off, and that is pretty much all that we need. Sometimes it's a little bit difficult to make sure that everything is aligned here into one different, it's like line. It's especially because the padding on everything is slightly different. So if you do have a problem with this, maybe Luke needs to be a little bit here. Okay, that looks a little better. So maybe we're gonna just, if you select an item and you just use your arrow keys, you can move it slightly. If you hold shift and move your arrows, you can move them 10 pixels at a time. And that is a pretty easy way to make sure that it's all aligned into just the same, it's like different way. That's a pretty good way to go about it. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add information for the heights, likes, height, and weight, just so that we have a little bit of this here. This, I've actually, sounding like a broken record here, I'm actually using just the new cards again. Let's see. I'm going to add one final new card. And in this new card, we're going to put data, heights, likes, let's see, weight, and height. Now, of course, if you wanted to use something else, you absolutely can. That's not such a big deal. In the format, we're going to go first, turn the background off as always, then go to the layout. Make sure that instead of using a single row, we're going to use a single column. That's, it's like how we're going to use it. For layout, you can actually see that right now it's only showing 3 items. Make sure that it's 4 if you have 4 different items, because we don't want to be scrolling through things. Now, let's see what else. The values itself, we are going to make, actually, we're going to turn values off. You'll see why in a second. Well, actually, I'll just tell you. The reason we're going to turn values off is because I want things to be side by side like this. And I think with values, you can't actually, it's like put it side by side. When you're actually going with values and label, the label is always either above or below the value. And that's not necessarily what I want. So I'm going to just turn values off actually. And for the labels, I'm going to make all of the labels magenta. That's fine. I'll make it slightly bold, and we'll just keep it size 12. That's completely fine. Okay, now we're actually going to go to reference labels, and we're going to go and turn on all of the reference labels so that for first heights, we're just going to put in first heights, and that is actually how we're going to show this information. If I get out of this selection and just go to all, I can go to the layout and make sure that it's going to be in a sentence. That's fine. And then if I go into the value, title, oh, here, this is what I'm looking for. Instead of below callout, I can put it to the right of the callout, and that way I can, it's like make sure that they just have. So if I turn the title off, and I can see the first hate is horror games. That's exactly what I want. You do have to, it's like mess with the layout to make sure that it's mid aligned, just like the text. But that's pretty easy to do, and you can just go through the different, it's like items. Instead of first likes, put in likes again. We will go here, make sure that the value itself is mid-aligned. I think it already should. So we'll just go put that for weights and heights as well. Now, once we've done all of that, what we can do is we can go and select series all again, because if you don't select series all, you won't be able to do a lot of these different things. If we turn divider off, we can make colors. It's like the same. If we, it's like put value on and off, that's, it's like how you get these things on and off. Fine. You can actually see that sometimes, it's like the formatting does have some issues. You can see like this specific, it's like text here is not working so great. So we'll just make sure that everything's working, it's like appropriately in just a second. Make sure that the spacing between labels, that's okay. That's really not that big of a deal. We're not going to deal with that right now. I can actually see it's probably because there's just a little too much text here. So if I, it's like scroll this a little bit to the side, and you can see that it has a little bit more values here. That's okay. What you need to do is you need to go to call out values, or even before that, you need to just go here to the data and remove all of the firsts. It still works that everything is the first, but just go like this, hates, likes, etc. Make sure that the callout values in the layout is also set to mid, or it's like if I put them to top, then they seem to be aligned just fine. So that's what I'm going to do. And also you can't change the callout size because we're not really using, it's like values. Sometimes there are different things that prevent you from changing specific items. That's okay. You don't need to worry about that too much. This is more than enough for us. And in the reference labels, when I go to all, I should be also able to change, I believe, somewhere. Yeah, so if I change to tabular, I can change how much space the text actually has, but I'm going to make sure that it's just in sentence for now, because that will keep things nice and tight. It might be that in order to fit everything here nicely like this, I will need to modify text size. But I'll do that in just a second. Let's go to the cards and we'll turn off the background and the border. And that's already pretty close to, to where we want to go. Make sure that it's more or less aligned to how we want to do it. Okay, I think that's okay for now. Go back to the reference labels. Make sure that they are in fact white, because that's what they should be. And we can make the text font a little bit smaller and give it a little bit more space to show everything. Now you can see this isn't like the cleanest way of doing things. So the way that I actually, went about trying to resolve this is I went to the value and in the layout, I set it to be right aligned. And if it's right aligned, I can move it a little bit closer like this. And therefore you see now it's a lot cleaner looking, and this is basically it. With that, you'll have a really nice display. You might want to mess with the spacing of where the image is exactly, that's fine. And the last thing that I recommend you to do before you try publishing this is just hit Control A so that you have everything selected. Go into properties, turn off your header icons. And once you do that, you won't have these header icons that show up when you're hovering over different visuals. And you'll have this really awesome StreetFighter dashboard made in honestly not that much time at all. So I really hope you learned something today. I hope that even though this isn't the most business value driven dashboard, you have learned how to use ImgURLs and SVGs in your reports, and that it brings you something. In order to make this as convenient as possible for you, I know I only use 2 measures, but they're a little bit long, so I've added them to the last tab of the dataset. You'll have them when you get the dataset from my GitHub. Thanks, and take care.